Kirby Smart, he's rattled. And next week here in Nashville, SEC Media Days, they will be on center stage. And it sounds as though he's going to be extremely defensive and not proactive with sending a new tone or a new message about all the off-field issues within the program since he got there. What do you make of the way Georgia, the way Kirby Smart is approaching this, knowing that next week there is going to be plenty of questions about everything from street racing to assault that will be on the table and he's going to be asked about?
Well, this is an old play from a very old playbook that Kirby Smart's going about right now. It's screaming about one thing over here, so you don't look at what's over here, okay? Mm-hmm. This is what the University of Georgia is doing. They are sending a retraction letter to the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, because they feel they were uncharacteristically depicted in a way that they are light on sexual assault in one story from the AJC that's separate of all the traffic incidents that led to 2 members of their program's death, separate of all that. And even Kirby Smart says, yeah, we got a problem with guys speeding and traffic issues around here, but we take it very seriously about sexual assault, and we think that this story is factually incorrect from the AJC. So they have sent something to them saying, take it down, retract it, whatever. But what Kirby Smart is showing right now is that this has gotten to him. Because this is back-to-back national championship winning head coach Kirby Smart that's had to spend an entire offseason reading negative headline after negative headline about his program. Coming to Nashville next week for SEC Media Days, he's going to get some uncomfortable questions, not just about the sexual assault stuff, which I thought, by the way, his quote was really good in what he said about it, and I believe him on it. And I think that Georgia thinks they're in the right on this and that the AJC screwed some things up. I believe what they're saying on that. At least I believe that they believe those things, and they're not just lying about it. But what's telling is what they're not talking about in this and what they're not demanding retractions on. And that is the fact that I've said since these stories started popping that their program has turned Athens, Georgia into the set of the next Fast and the Furious movie. And that is an issue that he acknowledges in his complaints about the AJC. That has to be remedied. There are cultural problems within the Georgia program. Even Kirby Smart cannot refute that with what's been happening. But here's the good news for Kirby Smart. None of it matters with his own school, fan base, boosters, anyone until they start losing. And I still see a roster stacked with 4- and 5-star players that Hutton, I don't think he's going to lose anytime soon. So this is going to be a big talking point at SEC Media Days. He's going to have to answer some questions about it. And then they're going to get right back to winning on the field, and Georgia people aren't going to care because the talking points are going to be this fall about Georgia playing again for a chance to get into the college football playoff and win a 3rd straight national title.
Totally agree. It's the street racing aspect of this is not University of Georgia and no one else. This is a statewide issue. The governor ran and pushed a bill through to raise the penalty for street racing across the state. Specifically, they were having issues in the Atlanta area during COVID. And they raised it from what was a very minimum fine if you were caught doing this to where you could serve up to 12 months in jail. You know, the old 1129 or whatever it is in county jail. $1,000 plus fine would be also added to that. They have an issue across the state. That's why he acknowledged it, because it's been an edict from the top down, from the state representatives and from the governor himself. And I'm thinking to myself here, that has to be on the forefront of what he's going to say in his opening statement. It has to be, because that's the message of the state of Georgia, not the University of Georgia.
Yeah. No,
I don't know how you ignore it.
I think that he's going to come in very prepared. And he's going to have a statement ready about it. And he's going to say that in his opening remarks. And he's going to hope that what he says in the statement is going to lead to a lack of questions about it, or he can refer back to his opening statement.
Yeah.
But I do think that Kirby Smart is smart enough to come into this thing with a prepared statement, and he's going to acknowledge an issue at play. He's also going to acknowledge that we take it very seriously. that what's going on, and we talked to our players about it, we take all this stuff very seriously. So this was the first strike levied by Georgia going into media days about this separate report about a lackadaisical approach to sexual assault with the football program that they're refuting, and they're demanding a retraction on that story. That's just step one of this. The rest is going to be answering questions and talking about the street racing issues.
Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, retracting the decision that was made to remove the All-Star game out of Atlanta due to new voting laws that were put in place and the controversy there that was stirred up by the vocal minority and by one side versus the other, that they responded to the mob instead of just sticking with the fans. He said that Atlanta is under consideration for the 2025 All-Star game, and that's where they have it right now. He wasn't going to speak further because they were also considering Chicago with the Cubs at Wrigley, Baltimore, and Toronto. All of those haven't hosted the All-Star game since Atlanta hosted the All-Star game in 2000. But the Braves were supposed to host it in 2021. They moved it to Colorado. And just by acknowledging that they're under consideration, Chad, isn't this Manfred saying that, hey, we're back in Atlanta, and it's going to be sooner rather than later for the 2025 All-Star game? I think it's more about keeping the other fan bases at bay while they kick the can down the road to host the All-Star game, because Atlanta's going to get it.
Well, it's an acknowledgement that he's saying we won the initial headline and the momentary headline from mainstream media when we canceled on Atlanta for the All-Star game with the Voting Rights Act that happened, the bill that was put into place. And now, years later, well, we don't really care about it. It doesn't matter anymore. That's kind of gone away. We're not talking about it. So Atlanta's fair game again. It was a ridiculously bad decision to begin with. And while Rob Manfred's never going to admit it being a bad decision, the fact that he's coming back now in such a short amount of time and saying, yeah, we're considering them for 2025, that's as close as you're going to get to an admission of guilt on that decision. And it's the right decision to bring Atlanta back into the mix. It was the wrong decision to pull the game from that city before.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you remember that? I mean, they were comparing and contrasting the voting laws in Georgia versus Colorado, where they moved it to Coors Field, and they were virtually identical to what the new law was becoming in Georgia. And the mainstream media didn't, complain about that the way they did in Atlanta, even though they moved it to a location that had virtually the same setup. Crazy.
Yeah, it's all so predictable.